So I titled this today, How Do You Become Great? How do you become great? And ultimately, there really are two different responses to the question of how you become great. The world defines greatness one way, greatness another way. The world has its ways that it advocates in the pursuit of greatness, while God says that we are to follow in the footsteps of the service of his son. When I use the term world, it's much like what we've been studying in First John chapter 2. The world is that which is a system that is dominated by what is opposed to God. It is ungodly and unrighteous and immoral. Okay? So that world has its own ways to which it utilizes to become great in the eyes of others. For the modern world, in the pursuit of greatness, it would appear that really almost anything goes to achieve its ultimate objective in being seen as great. Pride, arrogance, boastfulness, a constant elevation of self over others, self promotion, the pursuit of personal glory and personal honor. If need be, it's okay to be a little ruthless and underhanded to accomplish, once again, the main objective. Um, you probably should ignore others and their burdens and their needs because ultimately they're just going to drag you down or slow you down in your attainment of being great. Don't be willing to sacrifice for others unless you can sacrifice others on the altar of your success, right? So, in other words, if my ultimate objective in life is to be great, to be exalted, to be honored, to be seen as, wow, what a guy, in the meantime, I need to sacrifice a few people to do that, then the means satisfy the end, right? Use flattery, charm, charisma, empty promises, manipulation. Those are all good tools in the rise to the top. Self esteem, self fulfillment, self glory, self satisfaction. That was what I would call the constant drumbeat of the world, right? And you look around, and what do we see? We see books, we see seminars, we see conferences, we see magazines, we see organizations, all that are for the presenting of the self or the promotion of the self in the pursuit of being great. That's probably why we see so many people that are really only at the end of the day committed to who? To themselves, at the neglect of everyone else around them, including family, friends, neighbors, fellow citizens, and society in general. It's really not a flattering picture when you look out into the world to see how it is that men scramble for greatness and what they do to get there. What does God think of all of it? What does God think of all the self promotion and the selfish ambition that's in the hearts of men and women? Well, he helps us to understand that all of that does not descend from heaven to the earth. It is actually rooted in demonic activity. Okay? When you see the desire to be great, who do you think of? Biblically, when we think of people desiring to be great and exalted and honored, we think of the Pharisees and the scribes, right? The religious establishment of Jesus' day. They really weren't in it so that you might draw closer to God, draw closer to Yahweh. That really wasn't their chief goal. Their chief goal was that you might look upon them and say, wow, I wish I could be as great as them. Wish I could be as exalted as them, as famous as them, per se. But it reminds me that there was somebody else in the Bible who was desirous of being great at all costs, and it cost him everything. And that was the enemy of man. That was Satan himself. The Bible says, "For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there." Man's natural depravity combined with the devil's work stimulates the heart to pursue greatness at all costs. It really does. And I know when I look out upon you, you guys are a wise bunch, right? You're a smart bunch. So in other words, you know that what goes on in the world leaches into what? Into the church, okay? Instead of the church leaching itself into the culture and influencing it for the glory of God, ultimately it seems like in our culture, it's the world and their immorality that leaches in to the church. And so that pattern of stepping over anybody and on anybody that need be to separate yourself from the pack to be honored, unfortunately finds its way into the church body, okay? And when that happens, then we find a people operating within the body of Christ that have little regard for anyone outside of themselves. And so often the church looks a little different from the world. That's why oftentimes you see in churches power struggles that go on because people are single-minded and purpose to attain to the desires of their heart at all costs. And I wonder, can we shamelessly seek after our own honor and our own glory while it is that Jesus died as a servant on the cross? Right? We all know the answer to that. And I just want us to understand that the disciples were not immune from the desire to want to be great. Okay? I'm not talking about a people in the Bible who have no affiliation with Jesus, who are pagan in essence, not having any relationship with Yahweh. We're studying about men who have been with Jesus for a good long while. And yet in those men is the desire to want to have a step above the other so that they might be recognized as being great at the end of the day. So let's establish that first. Let's establish the fact that the disciples were preoccupied to be exalted and to be honored over the other in the kingdom that Jesus spoke about. Because remember, Jesus taught pretty consistently about a kingdom, didn't he? All right? And so their expectation is that Jesus is going to establish a physical, earthly kingdom by which somehow he's going to overthrow the Roman government, right? He's going to push them out. He's going to establish his own kingdom. And in this kingdom that Jesus establishes, I want to be a guy that has a little bit of pull, that has some prestige, that has some glory attached because of setting where it is that he's setting in this kingdom, right? That's something that they were struggling with internally, being his disciples. Now let's go to Luke's gospel. Let's go to Luke's gospel. We'll go to Luke chapter 9, 46 through 48. And some of this we already read back in Mark's, but we'll read it again. Because it seems to be a well-beaten path that they walked, this desire to be great and arguing with one another. Luke 9:46, and a dispute or an argument arose among them as to which of them would be greatest. Jesus, perceiving the thought of their heart, then uses a demonstration here by taking a little child and sets him by him. And he said then to the disciples, whoever receives this little child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you will all be great. Why in the world did he just use the little child? What was the common perception in those days? Children were insignificant. We don't waste our time with little children. If I'm going to be great, I ain't got time to be dealing with little kiddies. So Jesus purposely uses what? A little child, doesn't he? Go to Luke chapter 22. You want to be great, take care of these little kids. Luke 22, I found this one to be actually kind of bad. I mean, it's bad enough that we're arguing about greatness, but the time frame on this one is deplorable. Luke 22, verse 24. Now, I'm sure your Bibles have little subheadings all over the place, and we're just still, it seems, on the tail end of the Lord's Supper. Okay? So we've no more had but the Lord's Supper and giving thanks. And then suddenly in verse 24, what transpires? We find a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. So even at the Lord's Supper, we're arguing about who is going to be the greatest. And then, of course, he says to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those who exercise authority of them are called benefactors, but not so among you. On the contrary, he who is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he who governs as he who serves. For who is greater, he who sits at the table or he who serves? Is it not I? Is it not he who sits at the table? Yet I am among you as the one who serves. He's trying to beat it into their thick skulls about what greatness actually looks like. It looks like service, servanthood. That's actually what greatness is. And what's the time frame? We just settled down for a nice meal, didn't we? The last time I'm going to sit down and have a meal with you guys, I'm breaking bread, we're drinking wine, we're partaking all of it, unified. I'm teaching you things. And in the next breath, when supper's done, what do? We go right back to the preoccupation as we're sensing things are coming to a culmination of who's going to be great. And by the way, let me state this. All those passages that you read about them bickering about who is going to be great, all of them, with the exception of this one, come right after Jesus telling them that he is about to die. Which helps me to understand something, okay? When you are consumed with the desire to be great, you really don't have any consideration for what other people are going through or going to go through. You see? Jesus is literally relaying to them, I am about to die. And what is their reaction to that? Stunned silence? Yeah, sure. Disbelief? Sure. But that quickly exits their mind and back onto the subject matter of me. Me. Yeah, that stinks, man. That you're going to die. And what about me? What about me? Right? You know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of, let's just say you've got a mother and a father that call their children together. And the mother says, you know, children, I love you all. They're all adults at this point. But I have stage 4 cancer. The doctor's given me 2 weeks, right? And then having them children leave after that collectively amongst themselves and say, well, if mom dies in 2 weeks, you know, she's got a lot of money. And that money would certainly help me in life to get where I need to be so that people wouldn't look down on me. That's kind of what that would be like. Those kids, instead of spending the last 2 weeks consumed with service to a mother who gave their life to those kids, are now concerned with what's next for me after mom passes away. That's kind of what I get with the disciples here. It's kind of ugly. And that's what the me is. It's a little ugly. That's self-promotion. Now, in this account, in Matthew chapter 20, you find that mom is present, right? The mother of John and James, the sons of Zebedee, the sons of thunder, have their mom in tow. Now, there's a couple ways to view this. Now, I'm going to give you my perspective on it. Initially, when I've read through this narrative hundreds of times over the years, okay, and every time I read through the narrative, all I could come away with, what a couple of jokers. They are adult men, and they got their mommy doing their bidding for them, right? That's pitiful to me. But there's a couple ways of viewing this. As you find here the mother of the two men coming to Jesus and asking for something specific, it could be, I don't think it is, it could be just this. It could be a well-meaning mother looking to procure her son's future security and honor, right? Because let's be honest, generally, that's what moms do. Moms are looking out for the kids, trying to ensure a future security for them and some sort of elation or elevation by which they might be honored or praised or seen in a good light, right? And moms will justify any of the means they use in doing that to achieve the end goal for their kids. And the irony is sometimes mothers are actually working against the will of God because it may be God's will that He's trying to instill in them a servant's heart, right? A servant's heart, not the elevation of themselves. So sometimes moms are working against the grain. It could be that mom is just trying to ensure future security for the kids, okay? I don't think it's that. Could be that. This is what I believe is more likely. What I believe is more likely is mom is a pawn being utilized by the two boys to be able to get what it is they desire. And let's be honest. When self-promotion, when you are absorbed with your ultimate goal of being great, you will use anybody at your disposal to get that job done, even dear sweet old mom. And let's be honest, it's actually a pretty good ploy to use the mother to address Jesus for the asking. Because I don't know about you, this is the way it works with me over the years. If I have my mindset and another guy comes to me and tries to ply me about something, it ain't happening. If a woman comes to me and plies, it's a little more disarming, okay? In other words, you're more likely to get it done with the lady approaching and asking the question than the man. So to me, when I read this, it's pretty good thinking. It's not great motivation, but it's pretty good thinking, okay? So mom is the one that asks the questions with the odds of success probably being a little higher. But Jesus says this, and this is why it is I believe that she is a pawn. Verse 21, or verse 22, Jesus answers and says to her, "You don't know what you ask." Because she really doesn't know what she's asking. because she was at the behest of two adult men to ask the question. And then Jesus directly answers the two men and says, "Are you able?" He's not speaking to mom. "Are you, James, John, you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink, be baptized with the baptism I'm to be baptized with?" And they said, "We are able." And you might ask, well, what is the cup and what is this baptism he's talking about? It is the cup of suffering and it is the baptism of death. That's what it is. It is suffering and death. And guess what, guys? You are right. You will drink of that cup and you will experience that baptism. For my name's sake, both of you will drink it, right? And both of you will be baptized by it. What is he trying to get across to them? He's trying to get across to them this. You are thinking that the coming kingdom that you're all about is all about your self-exaltation. It is not about your self-exaltation. It is about servanthood and obedience and suffering for my name's sake. You have a wrong perspective of what the kingdom is going to bring for you. It's not going to bring your relation and your honor before all the people. It's going to bring quite the opposite. And that's why it is he tells them you're going to drink from it and you're going to be baptized with it. You don't understand it, and they don't, but you're going to endure it so that you actually might know what greatness looks like. Now, verse 24. When the 10 heard it, heard what? Not what Jesus said. When the 10 heard what the two men said, James and John, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. Now, on the surface, you might think that's actually a pretty good response, right? We might think that the 10 are thinking, man, what a crass, bold, ridiculous statement in the asking of that question that was made on those two guys' behalf. I can't believe after you spent all this time with Jesus that you have the gall to ask that question. That's not what's driving their displeasure. When you read the other accounts, you find the reason they're mad is because James and John and Mom beat them to the punch. Because they all desired the same thing. And the fact of the matter is once the ice has been broken, you can't go and ask yourself now. They're not going to follow one after another. Say, Jesus, can I sit on your right hand? Jesus, can I sit on your left hand? Nobody says nothing now. The topic has already been breached. And that's why they're peeved. That's why they're mad. Because they all have the same desire to be great. Jesus then calls them together, says to them in 25, look, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Those who are great exercise authority over them, right? Lord it over, you know what lord over means? It means to rule down upon. It means to dominate. It means to control, all right? That others at your beck and call. That's what lord over means. What are you and I used to? Either historically or even today. Historically, we see pharaohs, we see Caesars, we see Herods, right? If we want to go back to biblical days, what did they do? They lorded it over the people, right? They controlled people, they dominated people. Why? So that they would be great in the eyes of men. Has that ceased? Still goes on today. Goes on current administration, I see. It goes on today. I can pick leaders out all over the world. They have the same desire to dominate, to control, to lord over, look down upon others. Things that are decreed, right? Things that are demanded. Why are they demanded? Why are they done? Why are they declared? It's for the purpose of exalting the one who is over them. You see? so that they might receive the praise. They might receive the honor. They might receive the glory. Jesus says, that's what you are used to seeing. Somehow you think my kingdom is the same as that. My kingdom is not like that. Peter makes the remark in his in his letter, when he's talking about fellow elders, don't lord it over them, he says. So in the church, he's saying, when you are called as an under-shepherd of Christ, don't be that way. Don't try and dominate your people. Don't try and control your people. What should you do instead? Be a servant to your people. Okay? Do you know that's what pastors are? Pastors ultimately are a servant. Right? A servant to the people of God. Do you remember your Old Testament? In the Old Testament, you remember when Solomon died? And Solomon had a son named Rehoboam, right? Okay, so Rehoboam is a young guy. He wants to establish his own roots, his own way of doing things in the kingdom. And he goes to his dad's counselors, if you'd like to use that term. And he says, hey, I'm paraphrasing, how should I rule? Why would he ask that question? He wants to know how to rule so that he might be seen as not only great, but greater than his dad. Right? That's his preoccupation. What do those counselors say? If you just become a servant to the people, they will love you until the end. What does he do with that counsel? It's like me taking a piece of paper and crumpling it up and throwing it behind my back. Ain't no way that a king's son is going to be a servant to a lowly lot like this. I'm going to rule, and I'll be considered great. Funny thing is, if I don't bring up the name Rehoboam, and you haven't read it in the scriptures, ain't none of you remember his name. That's the futility of trying to be great. The way of greatness is declared by Jesus. When you look 26 through 28, he makes it very simple, very clear. He says, it shall not be so among you. Whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first of all, let him be your slave. In other words, let me tell you guys, if you want to be great in life, seen as great in the eyes of God, be a servant and be a slave to everybody around you. Therein is greatness in the eyes of God. It won't be great in the world's eyes. They'll scoff at it. They'll scoff at it. It'll be repugnant. It'll be shameful. What does your son do? Oh, he serves there. He serves this. He serves that. Oh. Doesn't he want to become something? Doesn't he want to be a lawyer? Doesn't he want to be a doctor? Doesn't he want to do something with his life? Well, he is. He's a servant. Oh. That's how the world's going to react. But what do I care what the world thinks? At the end of the day, what does God think? God says greatness is in servanthood. Becoming a slave. You might say, well, that's kind of odd. That's counterculture. Everything in here is counterculture, for crying out loud. And Jesus didn't just tell them in the abstract. In other words, Jesus wasn't oftentimes like my dad, do what I say, not what I do. Jesus wasn't that way. Jesus was, do what I say. Oh, by the way, let me demonstrate that. You remember your Bibles fairly well. You remember John 13 and the foot washing, right? You guys remember that passage? Whose responsibility was it actually to wash the feet of those folks that were in that household? The lowest slave on the rung. That was his job. But who's the guy that took up the towel? Jesus did. And by doing so, he demonstrated servanthood, didn't he? He says, I've left you an example that you should do what I do. To wash people's feet? No, to be a servant. It's okay to wash people's feet. It's a way of visually identifying a servant's heart. But the reality is it's the service itself that you should be emulating and doing, just as I have done to you. Because by all rights, when Jesus came, what could he have done? He could have ruled as king. It was all due him anyhow. He could have ruled, he could have had all the honor, all the accolades, all the prestige, could have exalted himself to the nth degree, and actually would have been right in doing so because he's worthy of it. But what did he do? He came as a servant instead, didn't he? And by that service, what did he do? He made a way for you and I to come to God, to have a relationship with God. If Jesus would have merely acted as the lording it over everybody on his first round trip, where does that leave you and I? I ain't dying on that cross for a rebellious, stiff-necked people. I'm going to be honored as a king. That leaves you and I out in the cold. That service of Christ led to our redemption. And by our service to others, may it lead to their redemption, by which God uses the example to reach down into their life and to draw them to Christ. May very well be. I guarantee it ain't going to be our arrogant boastfulness that is going to draw anybody to Christ. That's not going to work, because people already see that in the world, and it is an ugly picture. But by humble servanthood to the people around us, that is a demonstration of a servant's heart, the beating heart of Christ itself. So let's be servants. Because the irony is, someday, the Bible seems to indicate, you will rule and reign with Christ. But not until you serve first.